residents in northern Israel are being warned to prepare for possible conflict across the border from Lebanon in the coming days. That's the first time in many months that the people up there have had to worry about possible rocket fire, drones, or missiles coming across from Lebanon. And that's because Hezbollah is vowing to retaliate for all the strikes that are happening in Lebanon right now. Israel is really pounding Hezbollah and taking out infrastructure and headquarters and underground arms caches and commanders and everything else to try to keep Hezbollah from being able to reconstitute. But they may have to actually do a ground incursion shortly to actually keep that from happening. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on that. So the Israelis have been striking and targeting targets in Lebanon for the entire war. And the ceasefire that took place between the United States and the Lebanese army has been repeatedly violated by Hezbollah, not so much in firing rockets and missiles across the border, but in trying to rebuild their forces south of the Litani River. And we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. This map shows strikes that have taken place inside Lebanon. What I want to point out is the pink area inside Syria that is currently being held by the buffer zone that Israel has created inside Syria exactly corresponds with the width of the buffer zone that they want to create inside Lebanon. And that would make Israel much safer on both fronts. So that's their ultimate goal here. Israel's ultimate goal is just to create and maintain that buffer. Now, as the Israelis have been targeting this area, Israel has been warning the people inside Lebanon of where they're about to strike. So they're saying, look, everybody get out of this area because we're about to hit this area very hard. And if you'll look closely there, they're actually pointing out the actual building that they're about to flatten. This is the upshot of those warnings. These are traffic jams you're seeing inside Lebanon as people are trying to get out of the area that Israel is about to strike. And we also have footage of the actual strike that they made after Ali Madad. I don't know what that means. Ali Madad, maybe somebody who speaks Arabic can tell me what Ali Madad means. But they know where to point these cameras because Israel has told them where they're going to strike. So a lot of Arab media now inside Lebanon is saying that Israel may be about to start a multi-day ground invasion of Lebanon. This would be the most significant operation that the IDF conducted inside Lebanon since the ceasefire took effect. And this is specifically because Hezbollah says in a letter that they sent to the leaders of Lebanon that it will from now on respond to Israeli attacks against its militants. They emphasize that this does not necessarily mean a decision for war, but stresses the organization's right to respond, and they're couching it now as this is in defense of Lebanon. Even the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army know Hezbollah does not care about defending Lebanon per se. They are a proxy of Iran. They're doing the will of Iran, and they've actually been a real drag on the Lebanese government, the Lebanese economy, ever since they took power. And they are as much a political force in Lebanon as a military one. And so the Lebanese government, they're really having a hard time with this because the United States gave Lebanon an ultimatum that they must disarm Hezbollah by the end of November. And if they don't, there will be severe consequences. A lot of that may take the form of diplomatic consequences or economic consequences as the United States says, okay, we're not going to continue to fund things that we're currently funding in Lebanon. Right now, we're sending more than $300 million a year in military aid to Lebanon to try to prop up their army because up until Operation Beeper, Grim Beeper, that took place, the Hezbollah forces inside Lebanon were actually stronger than the Lebanese army. So the United States is trying to strengthen the Lebanese army and make them able to take out Hezbollah and at least degrade them to the point where they're not a military threat anymore. But the message that Hezbollah is sending to the president of Lebanon is that they will not even discuss the issue of giving up their weapons. And they warn that negotiation with Israel is a trap that only serves Israeli interests. And they add that Hezbollah is concerned with stopping Israeli aggression and not being dragged into negotiations. So they prefer to negotiate militarily. There was one comment I wanted to get to that says, I thought there were still troops in Syria guarding the stolen oil for Israel. Echo the collapse. That's an ignorant statement because, number one, Israel doesn't get any oil from Syria at all. They don't need to, and they wouldn't want to, because the oil that comes out of Syria, number one, is far too little. That's not near enough to move the needle in terms of what Israel needs. Number two, it's very dirty, very poorly extracted. Most of the oil that comes out of Syria gets sent to like African countries, Iran, places like that. And so Israel gets the vast majority of its oil from Azerbaijan via Turkey. There's a pipeline that runs from Azerbaijan. It can't cross Armenia because Azerbaijan and Armenia don't get along. So that pipeline goes up through Tbilisi in Georgia and then comes across into Turkey and comes all the way across Turkey and down to the port near Ceyhan, and then gets put on ships and shipped south in the Mediterranean, past Syria, past Lebanon, into, actually a lot of it goes into Ashkelon, but they can go into Haifa as well. So that represents 40 to 60% of all the oil that Israel gets. And that's one of the reasons why Israel maintains friendly relations with Azerbaijan, even though Azerbaijan is a extremist Muslim dictatorship. So typically they wouldn't be friendly, but they're friendly for two reasons. Israel needs their oil, and Azerbaijan is against Iran, so the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that causes a lot of heartache for Armenians because they have been on the receiving end of a lot of Israeli munitions that were purchased by Azerbaijan. This is during the war in 2020 and then again in 2023. That's a very sad state of affairs. Israel and Armenia really should be allies. They both face existential threats from extremist Muslim nations that surround them. They've both been the subject of pogroms and genocide at the hands of those Muslim invaders. I've said this many times. Israel doesn't really give much of a thought to Armenia. And the Armenians, there are quite a few who live in Israel. There's a whole Armenian quarter in the old city of Jerusalem, for example. But those Armenians actually relate more to the Palestinians than they do to the Jews, and that creates a little conflict. So it's just an unfortunate sort of outgrowth of those geopolitics. But anyway, to answer the comment, the only oil that's being stolen is the oil that's being smuggled into Iran. None of that oil is going to Israel at all. Israel is not doing anything in Syria in order to get oil from them. Israel gets its oil from Azerbaijan, Brazil, and there are a couple other places where they can get it if they need to. If they lost the oil supply from Azerbaijan, they'd be able to replace that. They actually built a pipeline down in the south in Eilat that's bidirectional that they export, but they could import it if they needed to from Iraq and other places in the Middle East, Kuwait and places like that. The defense minister, Israel Katz, told the IDF that they need to turn the area adjacent to the Israel-Egypt border into a closed military zone and change the rules of engagement down there and do the same thing that they're doing along the northern border and in Syria in terms of creating a buffer zone. But rather than create it in Egypt, they'd have to go to war with Egypt to do that. They're going to create it inside Gaza and along the border between Israel and Egypt. Part of the reason they're doing that is because they're seeing a tremendous amount of drone traffic coming across from Egypt and also from Jordan, bringing weapons into Gaza. Now, there was one more hostage body that was identified and returned. He was a Tanzanian citizen. He was murdered on October 7th, and he is an agricultural student in Israel. His name is Joshua Molay. I think gets us down to 5 or 6 hostage bodies that are left in Gaza. They returned 2 a couple days ago, and they can't just take their word for it because Hamas has returned bodies that they say were Israeli hostages that actually weren't. So Israel has to do some DNA analysis and stuff to figure out whether or not they're actually some of their hostages. It takes a little time to do that. And they have determined that this body was of the guy from Tanzania. Also of note is that the 2 previous bodies that were returned, one of them was the last remaining American dual citizen, Israeli-American hostage that had been killed on October 7th as well. So there are no more American hostages in there. I'm very surprised, frankly, that the Israelis have gotten back this many of their deceased hostages. Some of these are being found inside the zone in Gaza that is still being held by Israel, the yellow zone, and they're being found by armed Hamas factions. So how does that work? How is Israel allowing armed Hamas terrorists into the zone that they control with full knowledge? And it's likely because they're accompanying Red Cross members, and so Israel's not going to bomb the Red Cross, and these guys are able to come in. But it wouldn't surprise me if they're also digging up arms caches. They've found a couple of instances of that. They, of course, still have these couple hundred Hamas terrorists who they say are trapped in tunnels inside the yellow zone. Israel has said, look, you got 2 options. You can stay underground and die of starvation, or you can give yourselves up. They've been trying to negotiate something with Israel and let them have safe passage, but Israel's, no, we're not doing that. Been a couple of videos that have come out of Israel pumping concrete into those tunnels, but it looked to me like a video I've seen before, like about 6 months ago or something. So it could have been old video of Israel filling up a tunnel with concrete and not current. We haven't been able to corroborate that footage at all. So back to Lebanon, the IDF issued evacuation warnings to the members of about 30 different villages inside Lebanon. These are not evacuation warnings for Israeli citizens in northern Israel, but they did put out a warning to the Israelis that live in northern Israel to, number one, be prepared for some explosions because we're going to be blowing stuff up inside Lebanon, so don't freak out. And number 2, be prepared to run for your shelters because Hezbollah is saying that they are going to retaliate for these strikes inside Lebanon. So it remains to be seen whether or not Hezbollah will make good on that. From all appearances, Hezbollah has been significantly degraded inside Lebanon to the point where they're really not going to be able to mount a significant strike on Israel from southern Lebanon. They're not going to be able to do that. Israel continues. I think the thing that is really making the difference for Israel is that they have set up a incredibly robust intelligence gathering apparatus inside Lebanon. Very robust. And Hezbollah can't sneeze without Israel knowing about it up there. So that's why they keep striking these Hezbollah commanders. Anytime they come out from underground, they get spontaneously combusted by a drone strike or something like that from Israel. So Israel is keeping the lid on Hezbollah, and they're saying they're going to do what's necessary to continue to do that, even if it means another ground incursion into Lebanon. But the real significant news around that is that now the Lebanese government says that if Israel makes another ground incursion into Lebanon, that the Lebanese army will be fighting back against them, that Israel will be fighting the Lebanese army. That would be a big change. So far, Israel has not been fighting the Lebanese army. They've only been fighting against Hezbollah. On top of all that, it might sound like, wow, was the war really going to ramp up now? Or are we going to have to, is this ever going to end for Israel? We've seen continued strikes and missions that they've been accomplishing inside the areas of Judea and Samaria. We have a video here from an operation. I want to say this is Tulkarm, but I may be wrong about that. But this is an operation that took place last night where IDF troops were engaging militants inside some of those areas of Judea and Samaria. That is going to continue for some time to come. There's still a lot of Hamas affiliated operatives in those areas that the media calls the West Bank. Hamas still has a presence in Lebanon as well. That in and of itself is not going to end. However, because of the success that Israel has had fighting Hamas in Gaza, getting their hostages back, and really keeping a lid on the rest of these 7 fronts that they've had to fight on throughout this war, they have announced an official end to combat operations. And now they're transitioning into sustainment operations where they're going to focus more on surveillance and precision strikes. Israel now has begun a mass demobilization of reserve forces across multiple fronts. That means thousands of soldiers are being released from duty and they're being allowed to go back to their lives. That's going to be a huge economic boost for Israel. This is a big deal. 2 long, hard years. The full-scale war between Israel and its enemies is coming to a close. That is major. That's major.